headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
Yeah, I'd call them, and I think we should all call them protections, not restrictions. And I think it's foolhardy to remove them in this way. Risks remain for nearly 4 million people with diseases that make them vulnerable, and also in particular for disabled people who have been more or less totally neglected through the pandemic. 60% of deaths have been disabled people. The additional booster that's recommended by the JCVI just today shows that the risk remains real. We have 68,000 cases a day, 1 in 20 people infected, 100 people die from COVID every day. I mean, it's a very serious situation. And by making all these changes, we're affecting people in a very serious way. It's a terrible choice for lowest paid workers going to work infected with COVID or risk losing income by isolating at home. This is social and employment pressure to spread a bug, and employees and the self-employed having to fight not going to work. Such high levels of infection breed new variants, and if the protection measures are stopped, then the University of Warwick suggests that the potential for increasing transmission would increase by about 25 to 80%.
I will say this, Brian, and my job is not here to say one thing or t'other, and I want to assure both of you of that, and people listening, it's up to them. It's how they, the people listening and watching this, decide. Karol, the thing I can't get right, and I am not an expert, you two are, is we have lived in a country who for 2 years, all I have heard every single day is people saying, when are we going to be free of this? When are we going to get out of this? I've seen a Prime Minister stood at a lectern with two scientists who've become famous in their own rights, who have said repeatedly about scientific information. They're nowhere to be seen now, by the way. I don't know whether that's a different thing. Isn't it time, I guess... There's no way of putting this correctly, because Brian will say people are dying. People die of the flu. People die of many, many things. Is it not now a time where we should take personal responsibility and get on with our lives? Because otherwise, are we not going to be stuck in this forever?
Exactly so. And Brian's made some very cogent points, and I don't disagree with him on some of them. But we've got to look at the bigger picture. It's very easy to go into a pandemic and put all dramatic things, lockdown, masks, all the other things we've had. It's much more difficult to time, to nuance, to use the word that's often bandied about for the last 2 years, the point to which you come out of it. Look, there are only 335 people on ventilators because of COVID at the moment in the UK. It's a very small amount. It's very sad for those that have that. Some of them have got other illnesses, and that's why they require lung support, basically. But for the rest of society, we've got to do something. We've got to get out of this. You know, we spent £37 billion on test and trace, a complete failure. Vaccines, fantastic. Logistics, just fantastic. And, you know, the plan to vaccinate people over 75 and the vulnerable with a fourth injection, that's good. But we've got to get back to normal. 1,750 people die every day, 400 of them with cancer, which is my specialty. And, you know, if you put your money onto COVID, when it's essentially over, you're not going to treat other diseases, cancer, heart disease, stroke.
Jump in, Brian, jump in,
please. It's not essentially over. It's absolutely not essentially. You haven't mentioned long COVID either. This isn't just about killing people, which it does. It's also about disabling people, perhaps for years or even for the rest of their lives.
But can I jump in, as I'm not medical, Brian? Can I jump in and grab something? Can I jump in and ask you something that Professor Karol just said? Tell me if this is relevant. I mean, even I'm amazed by this. Karol just said, and he qualified it by saying, obviously for those families, very difficult. Only 335 people in the whole of the UK are on ventilators due to COVID. Fact, yes?
I presume that's right. I mean,
you presume,
yes.
And the other 69,996,000 are not. There has to come a point, isn't there, where we go, sorry, but we've got to move on. There has to be that, isn't there, Brian? Because the problem is...
Yes, that does.
But how do you profess moving on then when it seems that certain parts of the medical profession want to keep us held back? For every time there's a move forward, somebody in the medical profession says, no, hold on, this is dangerous.
It's not about holding back. It's finding the right protections in the right place. And, of course, eventually we will live with this virus, but living with it at the moment means dying from it. It's not learning to live with it, it's learning to die.
But won't people always die from things?
Yes, of course they will. But we have, laws that protect us from driving into other people. We have all sorts of laws that you would count as being restrictions.
All right, let me put it another way, Brian. Let me put it another way for businesses and for people listening to you today, right? And I'm going to be very direct. People have been dying with restrictions in place, so there's absolutely no guarantee that those restrictions have protected us. People have been dying whilst there have been restrictions. That's an absolute fact. The thing is, businesses are going bust. People are suffering long-term mental health issues as well as long-term COVID.
Yes.
And those people want to get on with their lives. And it's such a contentious issue. Of course it's contentious. But give me something. Give the people cynically listening saying this guy just is part of the medical profession that never want to move on. What would you say to those people, Brian?
Of course I want to move on. I want us to live well with this virus like other viruses. We have made enormous progression with vaccinations and with all sorts of medical advances as a result of this pandemic. But this is not the time to be relaxing everything. What I think we should be doing is that masks should be mandatory in places like transport and theatres. Mask wearing is simple. It doesn't affect the economy. It shows respect for others. Testing should remain. It should have free lateral flow tests. Don't forget that if we stop these things or make them much more difficult, we're blinding ourselves by reducing testing and isolation. It robs us of the most fundamental means of controlling the spread of this virus. So, of course, things are changing. It's wonderful that there are so few people in ICU for COVID. I mean, that is wonderful. But this is not the time to throw all caution to the winds. I'm not the only person. It's not just the medical profession that is saying this. We also want self-isolation with support for those infected. So we need much better support, better ventilation in schools. And it's not clear to me to what degree we're maintaining surveillance data to pick up new variants. If we don't do that properly, that is seriously dangerous.
Karol?
Don't forget, the more infections there are, the more likelihood...
Brian, could you do me a favour and listen to somebody else for just a second? Many people are messaging in saying, and I quote, your comment, sir, needs picking up upon. 100 people a day are dying with COVID, not of it.
I understand that it is as a result of
Let
COVID.
Karol speak, Brian, if you wouldn't mind. Let Karol have a chat.
Brian, you do make some good points, but the total picture is you'll never give up. There's got to be a point at which we say COVID is endemic. It's just like the flu. It's just like the common cold. It will kill people. People have to take precautions. We have to be immunized if you're worried about it. It's an individual decision if you wear a mask on a train or on a bus. It can't be any other way. We've got to come out of it. If you think of my cancer patients, many have died because of COVID, because they haven't got treatment quickly, partly because they're too scared to use the NHS, partly because the NHS wasn't open for them in the normal way. We've got to come to the end of that. People are always going to die. As I said, 1,750 people die in the UK every single day. And the number with COVID is dropping precipitously. Number of infection, number of hospitalizations, number of ventilations, and number of deaths are really dropping. And now is the time. It's ready. And Boris, love him or hate him, he's made the right call here, I can tell you. And I think most doctors would agree with that, Brian. Most of us think it's time to move on. We have to have precautions. We have to look for new variants. You're quite right there. We have to have systems in place to pick up new viruses, not SARS, other new viruses that may come to this country. We just can't stop society. And, it's a political thing as well. The Labour Party are going to make a noise about it. Keir Starmer's going to say things. That's political games. Scotland will do something different from Boris just to show they can. Wales, you have to go through the Severn Tunnel and wear a mask as you go through the tunnel. But they announced that. No one does, but you have to go through that farce. It's a theatre. And most of the precautions we do are purely theatrical to keep people happy for the politicians. So let's come to an end. Let's move on and get a life and carry on with normal healthcare and normal economy.
Gentlemen, I have to leave it there, but just one last thought, which is on the text. Lateral flow tests are costing this government and this country billions. We're also, though, supposed to be reducing our carbon footprint, not polluting the planet with millions of disposable masks and plastics which are used. It's interesting. Listen, there's two very different sides of the debate. The people will make up their minds. Dr. Brian Fisher, Professor Karol Sikora, thank you very much indeed. This is Talk.
Good talk. Hot talk.
Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.